The chamber erupted in pandemonium as Eulalie Beaumont extended her palm, unleashing a vortex of obsidian energy that silenced the snarling council elders, stripping their vaunted auras bare and leaving them crumpled like discarded puppets. In that cataclysmic instant, the air thickened with the acrid tang of fear. Her mismatched eyes, one sapphire, one emerald, blazing with the fury of a storm long suppressed, as her husband, Lord Alastair Drummond, shielded her with claws extended, his roar echoing defiance against the traitors who sought to chain her anew. If this eruption of raw power seized your breath, smash that subscribe button now, because the reckonings to follow will redefine allegiance and shatter every illusion of control. Yet as the shadows coiled around her, Eulalie knew this was no mere victory. It was the precipice of a war where her very essence could either crown or doom the man who had dared to claim her heart. The elders' gasps turned to whimpers, their ancient thrones cracking under the weight of her negation, while Alastair's grip on her arm tightened, not in restraint, but in unyielding solidarity, his amber gaze promising that together they would eclipse the old world. The grand hall of Drummond Citadel trembled under the onslaught of Eulalie's unleashed fury, her outstretched hand channeling a maelstrom of inky void that devoured the elders' feral howls, reducing their shape-shifted forms to quivering human frailty. Sapphire and emerald eyes locked in unyielding resolve, she stood defiant in her ebony gown, the fabric whispering against her porcelain skin like a lover's secret, while Lord Alastair Drummond, his muscular frame coiled like a predator mid-leap, positioned himself as her unbreakable bulwark, his claws glinting in the flickering torchlight. The air grew heavy, saturated with the metallic scent of blood and the acrid bite of ozone, as the council's ancient tapestries shredded under the force of her negation, their embroidered beasts unraveling thread by thread. Eulalie felt the power surge through her veins, a cold fire that both exhilarated and terrified, knowing this act sealed their fate against the realm's shadowy overlords. Alastair's hand brushed hers, a spark of warmth amid the chaos, his amber eyes fierce with pride yet shadowed by the cost of her awakening. In the shadowed corridors leading to this eruption, the story had begun far humbler, in the fog-shrouded manor of Beaumont Hall, where Eulalie had long been confined to the Undercroft's damp embrace. The northern moors of Eldoria stretched endlessly outside, their heather-laden winds carrying whispers of ancient pacts and blood debts. Reginald Beaumont, the iron-fisted patriarch whose shape-shifting lineage traced back to the misty highlands, paced his opulent study, the crystal decanter in his grip trembling with barely contained rage. "The sovereign demands tribute," he muttered, his voice a gravelly thunder that echoed off the oak-paneled walls. "And we'll give him what he least expects." Upstairs, Lavinia Beaumont, Eulalie's elder sister, a vision of haughty elegance with her auburn curls and emerald gown, preened before a gilded mirror, her laughter sharp as a dagger. "Father, surely you jest. Send me? I charm the sovereign into submission." But Reginald's eyes darkened, his form rippling with the threat of a partial shift, fur bristling along his arms. "No, Lavinia, you're too valuable for his claws. We'll send the other, the wretch in the depths." Eulalie, at 22, knelt in the Undercroft's gloom, her calloused hands scrubbing grime from stone flags with a frayed rag, the chill seeping into her bones like an old companion. Her raven hair, matted and unkempt, fell across her face, hiding the heterochromatic gaze that marked her as other. Years of meager rations had etched her frame slender, almost fragile, yet within burned a quiet resilience, forged in silence. She heard the guards' boots before they arrived, their iron grips hauling her upward without ceremony. "Time to play princess," one sneered, dragging her into the light she so rarely saw. Thrown into Lavinia's lavish chamber, Eulalie blinked against the assault of candlelight and perfume. Lavinia circled her like a vulture, lips curled in disdain. Strip, you seller ghost. Father's bartering you to the sovereign to settle his follies. Eulalie's voice, raspy from disuse, emerged soft but steady. Why me? Lavinia's laugh was brittle. Because you're the curse he hides, the deformed relic. Veil up, and perhaps he'll spare us all his wrath. The gown enveloped her, heavy brocade ill-fitted and pinching, its scent of dust and forgotten dreams cloying. A thick lace veil descended, turning the world to muted haze. As the sovereign's entourage rumbled into the courtyard, Eulalie sensed him first, a primal aura of storm and iron, permeating the mist like destiny's inexorable pull. The ceremony unfolded in Beaumont Hall's foyer, a perfunctory exchange of vows under the watchful eyes of a trembling officiant. Reginald sweated profusely, his handshake with Alistair brief and clammy. Alistair, towering and impassive in his dark regalia, signed the pact with a quill's sharp scratch, his presence a furnace that made Eulalie's skin prickle. Done, he intoned, voice resonant as distant thunder. Without a glance, he strode into the fog, expecting her to follow. In the carriage's leather confines, Eulalie huddled in the corner, the veil her fragile armor. Alistair sat opposite, his profile etched in shadow, fingers drumming on his knee. He didn't speak, didn't pry, yet his silence carried weight, a judgment unspoken. As Beaumont Hall faded into the moors, Eulalie wondered if this exile was salvation or a deeper abyss. Arriving at Drummond Citadel, a monolithic fortress of granite and iron spires piercing the eternal twilight, Alistair vanished into its depths, leaving Eulalie to the care of Matron Colette, a stern woman with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes hidden behind duty. "The West Tower Suite," Alistair commanded from afar. Colette guided Eulalie through echoing halls, her touch gentle. "Come, child, let's shed this sodden shroud." In the opulent chamber, Eulalie perched on the bed's edge, refusing to lift the veil. "Not yet," she whispered, fear coiling tight. Hours ticked by in solitude, the fire's crackle her only companion, until the door creaked open. Alistair entered, shedding his cloak, his shirt sleeves rolled to reveal scarred forearms corded with strength. Exhaustion lined his features, but his gaze sharpened on her veiled form. "You're still shrouded?" he asked, pouring water with deliberate calm. "Remove it. I harbor no illusions of perfection." Eulalie's hands trembled, but his tone brooked no refusal, a subtle command that stirred something dormant within her. Pins clattered to the floor, the lace pooling like defeated mist. She braced for revulsion. Alistair's glass shattered, water spilling unchecked. He stared, transfixed, not in horror, but in awe. Her porcelain skin glowed, raven waves framing a face of ethereal grace. Those mismatched eyes a legend whispered in ancient tomes. Sapphire and emerald, harbingers of forgotten power. A pull ignited in his chest, primal and undeniable, mate. His inner beast surged, protective and possessive. "Who are you?" he demanded, voice hoarse. "Eulalie," she murmured. "The hidden one." Suspicion flickered, warring with instinct. Why conceal such radiance? A ploy? Yet her flinch at his approach spoke of deeper scars. "Why hide you?" he pressed, closing the distance. Eulalie recoiled instinctively, expecting pain. Alistair halted, rage kindling not at her, but for her. In that vulnerability, bonds began to weave, unseen, unbreakable. What scars would you bear in silence for survival? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear how this moment resonates with you. The hidden lodge lay cradled within Eldoria's frost-kissed pines, a forgotten sanctuary of timber beams and hearth-warmed stone. Blizzards sealed it off from the world, their winds howling through the forest like forsaken spirits denied rest. Snow pressed thick against the windows, muting the night into a pale, endless hush. Inside, Alistair stooped to the hearth, coaxing life from flint and steel. Flames caught, leaping eagerly, their glow carving sharp shadows across his face. Lines of command, exhaustion, and something unspoken. Across the room, Eulalie stood by the frost-laced window, her breath clouding the glass. Her once celebratory gown hung heavy on her frame, silk dulled and torn, a relic of a feast violently undone. "You fear me now," she said at last. Her voice was calm, almost detached, though her hands betrayed her, fingers trembling where they clutched the fabric. Alistair straightened, crossing to the sideboard. He poured amber liquor into 2 glasses, the scent sharp and grounding. He handed one to her. "Not you," he replied quietly. "The chaos, if it remains untamed." She took a cautious sip and coughed as the burn seared her throat. Heat bloomed in her chest, unwelcome but steadying. Hamish's words echoed unbidden in her mind. "Unmaker of alphas." Alistair began to pace, boots heavy against stone. "When your power surged," he said, choosing each word carefully, "it silenced my beast. Complete stillness. Peace." He stopped before her, eyes searching. "And that terrifies me. A sovereign without his beast is a king without a crown." He leaned closer, intent sharpening his voice. "We must learn to harness it." Dawn found them in a snow-blanketed clearing behind the lodge. The world was stripped to white and gray, breath hanging like smoke in the air. Alistair wore rugged leathers and furs, every inch the seasoned alpha. Eulalie stood opposite him in borrowed woolens, boots too large, sleeves rolled back with quiet resolve. "Evoke it," he commanded, his voice carrying through the trees. "Channel the pain." She hesitated. "Your father's indifference," he continued, relentless but not cruel. "Lavinia's cruelty. Do not turn away from it." The memories came without mercy. Long nights locked beneath the undercroft, the sound of shears ripping through her hair in spiteful hands, the sting of shallow cuts meant to humiliate rather than kill, hunger gnawing so fiercely it blurred the edges of thought. Her breath shuddered. Something answered. A flicker, dark and lightless, sparked at her fingertips, the air warping around it. "Direct it," Alistair urged. He unleashed his aura in response, a golden tide of dominance and command rolling outward, instinctive and overwhelming. The ground seemed to hum beneath its weight. Eulalie reacted without thought. The void surged forward, colliding with his power not as a blade, but as an erasure. Alistair staggered. Then he fell to one knee, gasping. The gold drained from his eyes, leaving them startlingly human. "You quenched it," he rasped, then laughed, breathless and awed. "A switch, not a weapon. Reginald underestimated you." Before she could answer, he rose and pulled her into him, his arms wrapped tight, heat pouring from him, melting the snow between them. "I'll protect you," he vowed, voice low and fierce. His lips found hers, urgent, consuming. The kiss burned away hesitation, walls collapsing under the weight of shared danger and awakening trust. Then the night screamed. A siren-like wail tore through the forest. Alistair stiffened. "Beaumont," he hissed. Eulalie's hand flew to her throat, closing around the pendant she wore, her mother's heirloom. Realization struck like ice. "The tracker," she whispered. "It's keyed to this." She hurled it into the snow, but it was already too late. Shadows poured from the trees. Alistair charged first, a storm of claws and fury, his roar shaking snow from branches. He cut through the first wave with brutal efficiency, until silver-laced nets snapped tight around him. The metal burned, smoke rising from his flesh as he roared in pain. Eulalie ran to him and was seized, dragged forward. She was thrown to her knees before Reginald Beaumont, smug and resplendent in fur-lined coats. Lavinia stood beside him, pale and shaking, eyes darting everywhere but Eulalie's face. "Retrieve the asset," Reginald sneered. His voice carried triumph as he raised a pistol toward Alistair. He spoke casually of betrayal, of murder, of silencing his wife when Eulalie's power began to emerge. Something inside Eulalie broke open. Fear collapsed into stillness. Her eyes blackened completely as she stood. "No," she said. The word carried no sound, yet it tore through everything. A silent wave rippled outward, stripping beasts from bone and blood. Alphas dropped. Mercenaries froze, gasping, suddenly fragile and human. Reginald collapsed where he stood, his mind emptied, staring at nothing. The survivors fled. Lavinia fell to her knees, sobbing, begging. Alistair tore free of the net and caught Eulalie as she crumpled. "You saved us," he whispered, awe threaded through his voice. With Lavinia coerced into bearing witness, they returned to the lodge, and then beyond it. The night marked a turning point no one could undo. Eulalie's power was no longer hidden, no longer denied. Bonds were forged in blood and fire, and the balance of the realm tilted, no longer under the dominion of Alphas alone, but beneath the quiet, terrifying command of the one who could unmake them a Hallel. Weeks blurred together within the Citadel's fortified embrace. Time measured not by days but by vigilance. Deep beneath the stone, Reginald's hollowed shell lingered behind shadowed wards. Alive, breathing, yet absent. A mute monument to Eulalie's awakening. Guards avoided the corridor that housed him. Even seasoned warriors felt unease near the void he radiated, as though something essential had been scraped away. Lavinia, stripped of finery and pride, was kept under constant watch. She spoke in fragments now, half-truths laced with self-preservation, offering names, routes, and grudges in exchange for mercy. The sharpness that once defined her had fractured, leaving only desperation behind. Beyond the citadel walls, Eulalie trained. Each dawn found her and Alistair in secluded glens where ancient trees bent low, their roots heavy with forgotten power. There, her void was no longer a wild eruption but a discipline. She learned restraint, how to narrow its reach, how to shield allies even as enemies faltered. "Focus the eclipse," Alistair coached, circling her with patient intensity. "It isn't absence, it's balance." Their sessions blurred into something more intimate. Adjusting her stance became an excuse for lingering touches. Correcting her breathing brought his voice close to her ear. Power and trust braided together until it was impossible to tell where training ended and longing began. But the court was restless. Whispers slithered through marble halls. Genevieve, exiled yet unbroken, had resurfaced among fringe nobles, painting Eulalie as a living curse, a woman unraveling the Alpha King from within. Letters spread faster than truth, inked with fear and embellished with lies. Spies brought worse news. Fiona, ever calculating, was quietly aligning with rogue clans, speaking of containment and necessity. Neutralize the anomaly, restore the natural order. Alistair tightened the borders. Counsels grew shorter, tempers sharper. When sleep eluded him, Eulalie turned to the Citadel's oldest grimoires, dust-choked tomes bound in skin and silence. There she found the truth of the void, not a corruption, but a counterweight. Rare, cyclical, revered in some ages, eradicated in others. She was not an aberration. She was a balancer. Evenings softened the strain. By the hearth, Alistair shed his armor and spoke of scars earned in forgotten wars, of comrades lost to ambition and pride. "You quiet the storm in me," he admitted once, fingers tracing her jaw with unguarded tenderness. Her fears surfaced in turn. "What if I eclipse you without meaning to?" He answered not with words, but with devotion. Passionate nights where trust was reaffirmed again and again, where power yielded to love rather than domination. Yet doubt was seeded deliberately. Forged missives appeared, hinting at Alistair's infidelity, meant to fracture what strength could not. Eulalie felt the sting, but she waited, watched, learned. Her growth became undeniable. She addressed assemblies with calm authority, silencing a disruptive lord not through force, but precision. His aggression dissolving under a controlled nullification that left him humbled rather than broken. Hope flickered. Then came the ambush. Under moonless skies, mercenaries breached the outer walls, silver flashing in their hands. Genevieve's influence was unmistakable. Alistair led the defense personally, driving them back despite a wound that bled heavily. When the tide threatened to turn, Eulalie stepped forward, her void flowing outward in a disciplined arc, extinguishing Silver's bite and ending the assault without slaughter. In the quiet aftermath, they stood together amid shattered stone. "We rise together," Alistair declared before witnesses, slipping a ring onto her hand. Sapphire entwined with emerald, equal in strength and meaning. The moment was short-lived. A summons arrived at dawn. Fiona called for a tribunal. Eulalie's fate would be judged by the council itself, banishment, binding, or execution veiled in ceremony. Eulalie did not falter. Resolve hardened within her, the calm before a storm that would tear away every illusion the realm still clung to. The tribunal chamber loomed like a sanctified battlefield, a vast cathedral of marble veined with molten gold, its domed ceiling disappearing into shadow. Ancient sigils carved into the walls pulsed faintly as torches burned low, their flames casting elongated silhouettes that writhed like accusing specters. This was not merely a hall of judgment. It was where legacies were broken or sanctified. Eulalie entered at Alistair's side. Her armored gown of midnight silk flowed with restrained authority, woven with runic thread meant to resist both blade and aura. She held her chin high, heterochromatic eyes, one silver, one obsidian, unflinching beneath the weight of the elders' collective gaze. Whispers rippled outward like fractures in ice. At the dais, Hamish rose, his presence heavy with centuries of command. "The void threatens equilibrium," he intoned. "Prove your allegiance or face excision." The word echoed. Excision was not exile. It was erasure. Testimonies followed like ceremonial strikes. Lavinia was dragged forward first, pale, guarded, her voice trembling between fear and spite. She spoke of Reginald's cruelty, of manipulation and control, but her narrative twisted subtly, her accusations barbed. She encouraged him. Lavinia hissed, eyes darting to Eulalie. She fed his obsession. She wanted the throne destabilized. Gasps followed, lies layered with just enough truth to wound. Then Genevieve stepped forth, unbowed, radiant in calculated defiance. "She drains us," Genevieve declared, her voice smooth and venomous. "You've all felt it." The sovereign dulled, his dominance blunted. "She weakens him for her ascent." The chamber stirred violently. Doubt spread faster than reason. Alistair surged forward, his aura flaring like a rising sun. "Enough!" he thundered. "Every accusation reeks of fear. She has saved this realm more times than—" "Then let her stand," Fiona interrupted coolly. The matriarch rose, ancient and unyielding, relics igniting along her staff. Her aura unfurled, crushing, suffocating, designed to expose fracture. The chamber groaned under its weight. Eulalie stepped forward to counter, and screamed. Pain lanced through her as a hidden artifact embedded in the floor flared to life, disrupting her void. The backlash dropped her to one knee, breath stolen, vision blurring as murmurs erupted into chaos. Alistair moved instantly, but Etienne shouted, "Stop!" He strode into the chamber, arms laden with grimoires bound in blackened leather. These texts were hidden, sealed under council decree, he announced. And they tell a different story. Pages turned, runes ignited. Eulalie's bloodline unfolded before them. Not solely Beaumont, but older. Far older. Guardians predating the throne itself. Balancers of power, born when dominance threatened to consume the world. Her mother's name appeared, scratched out, condemned. Murdered to bury a prophecy. Silence fell like a blade. Prophecy of reform. Of a sovereign tempered by void. Of an age where power did not devour itself. Then betrayal struck again. A council scribe collapsed to his knees, sobbing, confessing under pressure. Genevieve had forged alliances with Beaumont remnants, orchestrated assassins, planned Alistair's death. Eulalie framed as the catalyst. The chamber fractured. Shouts, accusations, elders rising, others fleeing. In the turmoil, Alistair pulled Eulalie into a shadowed alcove, his hands trembling as they framed her face. "You are my anchor," he breathed. "Without you, I am adrift." Their kiss was fierce, defiant, born of survival and certainty, sealing not just love, but allegiance. When they returned, something had shifted. Eulalie rose again, steadier now. Her power responded differently, refined. She reached outward, selectively nullifying hostile auras while strengthening Alistair's presence, the two resonating as one. "I am no curse," she said softly, her voice carrying farther than any shout. "I am renewal." The council stood divided, some kneeling, others retreating to rally opposition. The illusion of unity lay in ruins, and as enemies closed ranks beyond the chamber's walls, one truth became undeniable. The balance of the realm had changed forever, and the darkest trials were yet to come. Isolation tightened its grip on the citadel like a closing fist. What had once been a symbol of sovereignty now stood encircled by siege and silence. Rogue clans, emboldened by Genevieve's silver-backed alliances, sealed mountain passes and poisoned trade routes. Supplies dwindled. Fires burned lower. The surrounding mists, once a natural defense, turned treacherous, concealing ambushes that claimed scouts and sentries alike. Each dawn arrived thinner than the last. Eulalie paced the ramparts relentlessly. Her void pulsed beneath her skin like an overworked heart, stretched thin by constant vigilance. shielding battlements, dampening hostile auras, calming panicked guards. The strain etched shadows beneath her heterochromatic eyes, her once steady breath now shallow. She felt frayed, unraveling thread by thread, haunted by the fear that her power, meant to balance, was slowly consuming her instead. Below, Alistair fought a different war. Silver-tainted arrows had found their mark in skirmishes beyond the walls, their venom dulling his beast and slowing regeneration. His wounds healed grudgingly, forcing him to abandon brute dominance for strategy and sacrifice. Each time he returned bloodied, Eulalie felt the fracture deepen, not just in him, but in herself. The sovereign reduced to mortal endurance was a sight the realm had never known. Then came betrayal. Etienne vanished during a night patrol. When he was recovered days later, broken, barely breathing, his confession shattered what remained of their certainty. Under torture, he had fed false intelligence to the enemy. Coordinates, timings, weak points. The resulting raid slaughtered an entire flank of loyalists. Funeral pyres lined the outer court. Whispers followed, quiet, poisonous. Perhaps surrender is mercy. Perhaps the void doomed us all. Eulalie withdrew inward, her nights consumed by visions she could not silence. Dreams of her mother surfaced with merciless clarity. Hands crushing her throat in a torchlit chamber. Reginald's breath hot with triumph as void light died in her eyes. A legacy smothered before it could bloom. Eulalie woke gasping, fingers clawing her chest as if she too were suffocating beneath history's weight. Then came the breach. A midnight assault ripped through the eastern wall. Explosions of rune-shattered stone and silver fire throwing the courtyard into chaos. Alistair charged to meet it, roaring defiance. But his voice faltered, his beast dulled, surrounded by enemies who had studied his every weakness. Eulalie ran. She poured everything she had left into the void, forcing it outward in a desperate surge. And it turned on her. The energy rebounded violently, ripping through her core. She collapsed mid-stride, breath stolen, limbs numb, her power sputtering into nothingness. For the first time since her awakening, the void went silent. Genevieve emerged from the smoke like a specter made flesh. "The eclipse ends tonight," she said calmly, blade raised. Alistair threw himself between them. The strike meant for Eulalie sank into his side, silver biting deep. His blood spilled across the snow in a vivid stain, steam rising as his knees buckled. He did not scream, only reached for Eulalie with shaking fingers. "Run," he whispered. She couldn't. The battle was driven back only by sheer desperation. Guards rallying, Genevieve retreating with a promise in her eyes. But the cost was devastating. In the infirmary's dim glow, Eulalie knelt beside Alistair's bed, hands slick with his blood, tears falling unchecked. His breath was shallow. His aura, once radiant, flickered weakly. "I failed you," she sobbed. "I failed all of you." Outside, horns sounded again. Enemies regrouping, walls weakened, hope bleeding out alongside him. Her power was gone. The citadel was breaking. The man she loved lay dying. This was the abyss, the moment where surrender whispered seductively, where the weight of history pressed too hard to bear. And yet, deep beneath the grief, beneath the fear, something stirred. Not power, purpose, a spark, small, defiant, unextinguished, waiting for the moment she chose to rise again. Eulalie rose from the infirmary not with fury, but with clarity. The air still smelled of antiseptic herbs and iron. Alistair's labored breaths echoing faintly behind her. Yet something within her had settled into stillness. In the hollow where panic once screamed, realization crystallized with quiet certainty. Her void had never been meant to destroy. It was not absence. It was equilibrium. All her life she had wielded it like a storm, reactive, emotional, raw. Rage had sharpened it. Fear had fractured it. But now she understood. The void answered not to force, but to acceptance. It balanced what overreached, calmed what raged too far. It was not domination, it was correction. And the truth had to be dragged into the light. She descended into the dungeons alone. Lavinia lay shackled in cold iron, her once regal composure reduced to a trembling shell. When Eulalie entered, the torches dimmed instinctively. Not extinguished, merely softened, as if the void itself listened. "Tell me," Eulalie said quietly, no threat in her tone, which made it far worse. "Why my mother had to die." Lavinia resisted at first, spite flickering, until Eulalie let the void breathe, not pressing, not attacking, simply removing Lavinia's lies. The truth spilled out like blood from an old wound. Reginald had feared a prophecy whispered through guardian bloodlines. A sovereign united with equilibrium would reform the realm, ending dynastic cruelty, breaking cycles of conquest. "You were the key," Lavinia sobbed. "Not the power, the union." He couldn't control what balanced him. The last illusion shattered. Eulalie left her there. Not in vengeance, but in truth. Her next steps carried her deeper still, beneath the citadel into the ancient vault where the guardians once convened. Stone older than the crown hummed as she knelt, her mother's pendant warm against her palm. The tracker sigils, once corrupt, had been cleansed. Now it pulsed with resonance, not surveillance. She meditated, not to summon power, but to listen. The spirits came softly, not commands, not judgments, guidance. Balance does not erase power, they whispered. It gives it purpose. Compassion flowed alongside strength. Mercy alongside consequence. The void responded, no longer a roar, but a steady current, obedient because it was finally understood. When she returned to the infirmary, Alistair stirred. His color had returned slightly, wounds knitting faster than before as Eulalie laid a hand over his heart, releasing a measured infusion, not enough to dominate, only to restore. His breath deepened. His eyes opened, sharp and searching. "You found it," he said hoarsely. "We found it," she corrected. He pulled her into him despite the pain, forehead resting against hers. "We fight as one," he vowed, no command in his voice, only trust. Hope reignited like flame meeting oil. Word spread quickly. Loyalists rallied. Eulalie's declaration echoed through the stronghold. Amnesty for defectors who laid down arms. The void nullified Genevieve's coercive pacts, breaking her hold on wavering clans. Choice returned, and many chose peace. Etienne was rescued in a daring infiltration under cover of mist, brought back bruised but alive. His loyalty reaffirmed with quiet shame and gratitude. Scouts returned with crucial intelligence. Genevieve's camp exposed. Supply lines thin. Confidence brittle. The moment had come. As banners were raised and warriors assembled, Eulalie stood at the citadel's threshold. Not as an anomaly, not as a weapon, but as balance incarnate. They marched together. And for the first time since the siege began, hope did not whisper. It are. The enemy encampment lay coiled in the valley below, half swallowed by rolling mist, its scattered fires glowing like watchful, malignant eyes. War drums echoed faintly through the fog, a heartbeat of defiance that faltered the moment Alistair raised his fist. The charge broke like thunder. Alistair surged forward at the vanguard, every movement a blend of feral instinct and calculated command. He did not fight blindly. This was not rage but reckoning. His warriors followed in disciplined waves, flanking through ravines and tree lines exactly as Etienne's intelligence had mapped. Steel rang against steel. Claws tore through armor. The valley erupted into controlled chaos. Eulalie moved differently. Where Alistair was force, she was precision. Her void flowed in deliberate currents, disabling, not annihilating. Enemy shifters stumbled mid-transformation, their power gently but firmly withdrawn. Blades slipped from numb fingers. Illusions collapsed. Panic spread not from terror but from confusion. Their strength was simply gone. Then the first heroic twist struck. Etienne spotted it, a banner signal out of rhythm. Commander hesitating, relaying false orders. The traitor revealed himself in the heat of battle, attempting to reroute reinforcements into a kill zone meant for Alistair. Etienne acted without hesitation, exposing the deception with a flare signal that flipped the battlefield's momentum in a breath. The enemy line fractured, and then Genevieve emerged. She strode through the smoke like a blade given form, her aura blazing with desperate fury. "Face me, sovereign," she snarled, leveling her weapon at Alistair. The battlefield seemed to recede as they met, two legacies colliding in a storm of sparks and snarls. Their duel was brutal and relentless. Genevieve fought with venomous precision, exploiting Alistair's lingering wounds, driving him back inch by inch. A misstep, silver grazing flesh, sent him to one knee. For the first time, doubt rippled through the ranks. Eulalie felt it, and chose. She stepped between them, her presence silencing the clash. Her void unfurled, not violently, not explosively, but absolutely. Genevieve's shift faltered mid-surge, power unraveling like thread pulled from a seam. The feral glow in her eyes extinguished, leaving only a mortal woman gasping in the dirt. "Yield," Eulalie said, her voice calm and unyielding. "Or be nothing." Genevieve broke. Exile was declared, not mercy, but balance. She was escorted away screaming curses that carried no power anymore. But the storm had one last convulsion. Fiona revealed herself atop a shattered ridge, relics blazing around her in a desperate constellation. Arcane blasts tore into the earth, flinging stone and flame toward friend and foe alike. The battlefield buckled. Eulalie stepped forward alone. She did not deflect. She absorbed. The void opened like a gravitational well, swallowing the relic's fury, compressing it into a spiraling vortex of silent force. With a final controlled release, the artifacts detonated inward, collapsing into harmless dust and light. Fiona fell screaming, her power spent, her ambition reduced to ash. Silence followed. Then cheers, raw, disbelieving, victorious. The enemy scattered. Those who remained knelt. Alistair crossed the battlefield and pulled Eulalie into his arms, his voice rough with emotion as his forehead pressed to hers. "You didn't just save me," he whispered. "You saved us all." Around them the mist lifted. The war was over, and nothing would ever return to what it had been before. Peace did not arrive as silence, it arrived as breath. Across Eldoria, the land itself seemed to exhale. Mists that once clung like secrets withdrew from the valleys, revealing sunlit stone and thawing forests. The citadel, long a monument to dominance and old blood, bloomed with renewed vitality. Banners replaced scorched sigils, shattered battlements reforged not merely stronger, but wiser. Alliances once bound by fear were reforged through oath and trust. Each packed a quiet rejection of tyranny. At the heart of it all stood Eulalie and Alistair. Together, they ruled not as sovereign and consort, but as equals. Eulalie's void was no longer whispered of as a curse. It was codified into guardian law, an unassailable principle woven into Eldoria's future. No alpha, no matter how powerful, would ever rule unchecked again. The balance she embodied became doctrine, enforced not through fear, but through accountability. Power, once hoarded, was now measured by restraint. Subplots found their reckonings. Lavinia, stripped of vanity and pretense, chose penance over exile. She worked among the displaced, aiding reforms with humility learned the hard way. Her redemption quiet, deliberate, and earned. Etienne's name was spoken with honor across the realm, songs carrying his courage from taverns to council halls. He never sought the praise, but accepted it with a softened smile. Growth shimmered everywhere, but nowhere more than in Eulalie herself. Once hidden, once hunted, now she sat in open chambers, listening to petitioners. Alphas, mortals, outcasts alike. Her heterochromatic eyes, once feared, became symbols of equilibrium. Light and void, strength and mercy, coexisting without erasure. She spoke rarely, but when she did, the room leaned in. Alistair watched her often in those moments, pride unguarded. He had been forged in war, tempered in loss, but it was love that refined him. Under her influence, he governed with foresight instead of force, choosing dialogue before dominance, wisdom before wrath. The beast within him no longer demanded control, it trusted. Their bond deepened in the quiet spaces, in moonlit walks along the ramparts, in shared laughter by the hearth, in the gentle promise of a child growing quietly between them, an heir not just of blood, but of balance. And so, in the highlands' vast embrace, they stood hands entwined, gazing over a realm transformed by courage, truth, and choice. The wind carried no echoes of war now, only the hum of renewal. Fulfillment radiated not as triumph, but as peace earned. A love not born of conquest, but of becoming.